Section 1. You will hear a man telephoning a sports club to ask about membership and facilities. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Good morning. Sorry, it's gone 12. I'll start again. Good afternoon, Kingswell Sports Club. How can I help you?
Oh, good afternoon. I was wondering if you could give me some information about membership and facilities.
The name of the sports club is Kingswell, so Kingswell has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good morning. Sorry, it's gone 12. I'll start again. Good afternoon, Kingswell Sports Club. How can I help you?
Oh, good afternoon. I was wondering if you could give me some information about membership and facilities.
Of course. What would you like to know?
Do you have tennis courts, for example?
No, I'm afraid we don't. We're primarily a golf club.
What about football? I heard you had a team.
No, I'm sorry. Perhaps you're thinking about Fresham Sports Centre.
Oh, right. I know it. I've played badminton there.
Have you? They've got a lot of facilities we don't have, and vice versa. We do have a Keep Fit studio, which is very popular with members, and then as well as that, there's swimming, of course.
That's good. I like to swim every day.
We have a range of classes, too.
Do you have judo classes? I'm keen to learn.
Well, at the moment, we offer kickboxing. We're planning to add judo and stretch classes soon. We're currently running a range of yoga classes, too.
What about relaxing after exercise? I assume you have a restaurant or something?
At the moment, we've got a salad bar, which is very popular. We'll also have a fully licensed restaurant by the end of the year.
Sounds good.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
What kind of membership are you interested in?
Not really sure. What are the options?
Well, there are 3 different membership schemes.
I see. What's the difference?
Well, the first one's called Gold, and you can use all the facilities at any time of the day or week. You can also join in as many classes as you like for free.
That sounds good. Is it very expensive?
Well, you pay a £250 joining fee, and then it's £450... Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's just gone up by £50. Sorry about that. It's now £500 for the annual subscription fee.
Right, got that. And what's the next type?
Well, that's silver. It's the same as gold, except you have to pay a small fee of £1 per lesson for any you do, and you can only use the centre at certain times.
I see. So when exactly?
You can only use the facilities between 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m.
So I couldn't use the pool at 8 in the morning or evening then?
That's right.
Okay, and the price for that? Is the joining fee the same as for gold?
Actually, it's slightly less than the £250. It's £225. But the annual fee is only £300. Does that sound more like what you want?
Well, it's still rather more expensive than I thought. I'm a student here in England, and I'm only here for 6 months.
Ah, then the bronze scheme would probably suit you best.
How is that different?
Well, some of the facilities have restricted use.
And do I have to pay for classes?
Yes, it's £3 for each class you join.
I see. And what are the hours then?
Between 10:30 and 3:30 weekdays only, and you pay a £50 joining fee. The annual fee is £180. It works out at £15 a month, so that would be quite a lot cheaper.
Oh, that should be all right. I could come in my free periods. What do I have to do if I want to join?
Well, we book you in for an assessment with an instructor who will show you how to use all the equipment. If you want to organise a trial session and look around the centre, you'll need to speak to David Kinchley.
Could you spell that, please?
Yes, David, KynchleY. I'll give you his direct line number. It's 0458 95311.
Thanks.
Thank you for calling Kingswell Sports Club.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a local radio broadcast about the Rivendon City Theatre. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
And here on Radio Rivendon, we have Lynn Rawley, the Public Relations Officer of our own Rivendon City Theatre. Hello, Lynn.
Hello.
Now, the theatre is reopening soon after its 3-year redevelopment program, isn't it?
That's right, and there are a lot of improvements. The first thing people will see when they go in is that the foyer has been repainted in the original green and gold. Then the box office has been reoriented with its own access from the side of the building instead of through the foyer, which means it can be open longer hours and has more space too. The shop that used to be in the foyer, which sold books and CDs, is the one part of the redevelopment which isn't yet complete. The plan is to find new premises for it near the theatre, and we've had difficulty finding somewhere suitable. We hope to reopen the shop in the next few months.
Will audiences find any difference in the auditorium?
Yes, we've increased the legroom between the rows. This means that there are now fewer seats, but we're sure audiences will be much happier. And we've installed air conditioning so it won't get so hot and stuffy. We already had a few seats which were suitable for wheelchair users, and now there are twice as many, which we hope will meet demand. Something else that will benefit audiences is the new lifts. The two we used to have were very small and slow. They've now gone, and we've got much more efficient ones.
Anything for the performers?
Yes, we've made a number of improvements backstage. The small, dark dressing rooms we used to have been converted into 2 large, airy rooms, so they're much more comfortable now. And the state-of-the-art electronic sound and lighting systems have been installed.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Okay, so what's the first play that audiences can see when the theatre reopens?
We've got a very exciting production of Peter Shaffer's Royal Hunt of the Sun, which is currently touring the country. That starts on October the 13th and runs till the 19th. We're experimenting a bit with the time the curtain goes up. We used to start all our performances at 7:30, but that made it difficult for people to go home by public transport. So instead, we're beginning at 7, because at 9:45, when it finishes, there are still buses running. Tickets are already selling fast. The Friday and Saturday performances sold out almost immediately, and in fact now there are only tickets for Monday and Thursday.
How much are they?
We've introduced a simpler price structure. Ticket prices used to range from £6 to £30, but now they're all £18. They're available from the box office, in person, by phone, fax or post, or online.
Okay, Lynn, now if you'd like to give the contact details for the theatre so that our listeners...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear a man inquiring about college courses. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi, can I help you?
I was told to come here because I'd like to talk to someone about taking a management course.
Right, I'm one of the tutors, so I should be able to help you.
Oh, good. My name's Brian Ardley. I've decided to enrol on a part-time management course. A friend of mine took one last year and recommended it to me.
Right.
Is there anything I should do before the course, like reading or anything?
We prefer to integrate reading with the course, so we don't give out a reading list in advance. But we like people to write a case study describing an organisation they know.
I've already done that, as my friend told me you wanted one. But would it be possible to sit in on a teaching session to see what it's like? I haven't been a student for quite a while.
Fine. Just let me know which date and I'll arrange it with the tutor.
Now, could I ask you about the college facilities, please?
Anything in particular?
Well, the course is 1 day a week, all day, isn't it? So presumably it's possible to buy food.
Yes, the refectory's open all day.
Does it cater for special diets? I have some food allergies.
Provided you warn the refectory in advance, it won't be a problem.
Good. What about facilities for young children? I'd like to bring my daughter here while I'm studying.
How old is she?
3.
Then she's eligible to join the nursery, which is supervised by a qualified nursery nurse. The waiting list for a place is quite long, though, so you ought to apply now.
OK.
I don't know if our careers advice service would be of any interest to you.
Yes, it might help me decide how to develop my career after the course.
The centre has a lot of reference materials and staff qualified to give guidance on a one-to-one basis.
I noticed a fitness centre next to the college. Is that for students?
It's open to everyone, but students pay an annual fee that's much less than the general public pay.
And presumably the college library stocks newspapers and journals as well as books.
Yes, and there's also an audio-visual room for viewing and listening to videos, cassettes and so on.
Is there also access to computers?
Yes, your tutor will need to arrange with the technical support team for you to get a password, so ask him or her about it when you start the course.
OK.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
By the way, do you know about our business centre?
No, what's that?
It's a training resource, a collection of materials for people to study on their own or use in their own organisations.
Uh-huh. You mean books and videos?
Yes, and manuals for self-study, plus a lot of computer-based materials so people can work through them at their own speed and repeat anything they aren't sure about. And you can hire laptops to use in your own home or workplace, as well as printers that you can take away.
Does it have anything that I could use to improve my study skills? I don't have much idea about report writing, and I'm sure I'll need it on the course.
Oh, yes, there's plenty of useful material. Just ask one of the staff.
Does the centre cover all the main areas of business?
Yes, topics like finance and, of course, marketing, that's a popular one. Local managers seem to queue up to borrow the videos.
So it isn't just for students, then?
No, it's for members only, but anyone can join.
How much does it cost?
£100 a year for a company and £50 for an individual, with no discount for students, I'm afraid.
Well, that's very helpful. Well, I think that's all. I'd better go home and fill in the enrolment form. Thanks for all your help.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear a talk on a social history of the East End of London. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In the last few weeks, we've been looking at various aspects of the social history of London. And this morning, we're continuing with a look at life in the area called the East End. I'll start with a brief history of the district and then focus on life in the first half of the 20th century. Back in the 1st to the 4th centuries AD, when the Romans controlled England, London grew into a town of 45,000 people, and what's now the East End, the area by the River Thames and along the road heading north-east from London to the coast, consisted of farmland with crops and livestock, which helped to feed that population. The Romans left in 410, at the beginning of the 5th century, and from then onwards, the country suffered a series of invasions by tribes from present-day Germany and Denmark, the Angles, Saxons and Jutes, many of whom settled in the East End. The technology they introduced meant that metal and leather goods were produced there for the first time, and as the East End was by the river, ships could transport goods between there and foreign markets. In the 11th century, in 1066 to be precise, the Normans conquered England, and during the next few centuries London became one of the most powerful and prosperous cities in Europe. The East End benefited from this, and because there were fewer restrictions there than in the city itself, plenty of newcomers settled there from abroad, bringing their skills as workers, merchants or moneylenders during the next few hundred years. In the 16th century, the first dock was dug, where ships were constructed, eventually making the East End the focus of massive international trade. And in the late 16th century, when much of the rest of England was suffering economically, a lot of agricultural workers came to the East End to look for alternative work. In the 17th century, the East End was still a series of separate, semi-rural settlements. There was a shortage of accommodation, so marshland was drained and built on to house the large numbers of people now living there. By the 19th century, London was the busiest port in the world, and this became the main source of employment in the East End. Those who could afford to live in more pleasant surroundings moved out, and the area became one where the vast majority of people lived in extreme poverty and suffered from appalling sanitary conditions. That brief outline takes us to the beginning of the 20th century, and now we'll turn to housing. At the beginning of the century, living conditions for the majority of working people in East London were very basic indeed. Houses were crowded closely together and usually very badly built because there was no regulation. But the poor and needy were attracted by the possibility of work, and they had to be housed. It was the availability rather than the condition of the housing that was the major concern for tenants and landlords alike. Few houses had electricity at this time, so other sources of power were used, like coal for the fires which heated perhaps just one room. Of course, the smoke from these contributed a great deal to the air pollution for which London used to be famous. A tiny, damp, unhealthy house like this might well be occupied by 2 full families, possibly including several children, grandparents, aunts and uncles. Now, before I go on to health implications of this way of life, I'll say something about food and nutrition.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. Section 1. You will hear a woman calling a local museum about children's art and craft workshops. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Good morning, Sidmouth Museum. Can I help you?
Oh, yes. Good morning. I'm interested in the children's workshops, and I'd like a little more information, please.
Do you mean the art and craft workshops?
Yes, a friend of a friend mentioned them. The children do painting and make models and so forth.
Yes, of course. Where to begin? First of all, as you probably know, they run every Saturday.
The workshops are organised every Saturday, so Saturday has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning, Sidmouth Museum. Can I help you?
Oh, yes. Good morning. I'm interested in the children's workshops, and I'd like a little more information, please.
Do you mean the art and craft workshops?
Yes, a friend of a friend mentioned them. The children do painting and make models and so forth.
Yes, of course. Where to begin? First of all, as you probably know, they run every Saturday.
Fine. And what about ages?
Well, all ages from 5 upwards are welcome, though we do ask that children below 8 years of age are accompanied by an adult.
Fine. That wouldn't be a problem. What about cost?
Well, I think you'll find them very reasonable. It's £2.50 a child, with 80 pence off for 2 or more children from the same family.
Oh, yes. Very reasonable. And are they held in the main museum?
Not exactly. They're nearby.
Could you give me the full address? I don't know the area very well.
Yes. It's Winter House.
Right.
And that's in Tamer Street.
Could you spell that, please?
Yes. Tamer Street.
Lovely.
And I do need to tell you that there's a security entrance, so you need to press the green button for someone to let you in. Don't press the red button, please. But don't worry, it's all clearly labelled.
Okay. And one more question. Is parking available nearby? We're driving in from out of town.
Your best bet is to leave your car at the back of the library. On a Saturday morning, there are plenty of spaces there. It's right next door to the museum.
And can I ask about booking places?
Yes, and I must tell you, you really should book by calling the education department here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Should I have rung them instead of the main museum number?
No, that's fine this time. Please don't worry. But for future reference, I'll give you the direct number. It's 200 765.
Great. I've got that.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
But I'm very happy to give you information about the next 2 workshops. On Saturday the 16th, there's building castles.
Oh, sounds great.
This involves quite a bit of glue, so just make sure the kids are in old clothes.
I know. Ones I don't mind getting mucky.
Exactly. And if possible, could you bring along bottle tops, which the children might be able to use in the models, as decoration?
We'll certainly try to find some for you.
Then the following week...
That'll be the 23rd, won't it?
Yes, that's right. On that day, it's what we call Undersea Worlds. This is where they make scenes with fishes, underground caverns, and so on.
Is that likely to get very dirty? Lots of paint splashes?
Not really. So we don't recommend any special clothes for that one. But if you could search out some silver paper to bring along to use in the sessions, it's shiny, it looks like water, that'd be great.
Yes, of course. We'll see what we can come up with. Well, thank you ever so much for all your help. The sessions sound really good, and I'll certainly book up for the next 2.
Lovely. Thanks very much for ringing.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a customer services official giving information to a passenger at a railway station in a town called Trebirch. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17.
Hello. My family and I are staying here in Trebirch for a week or two, and we wanted to know about the train services. We're hoping to do a few local trips.
Okay. Well, I can give you lots of details about all the trains going from Trebirch in the southwest. This leaflet will be very helpful, but I can tell you some of the main things. We've got 2 main train stations in the town. King Street is for local commuter lines and regional services.
What about trains to London? I'll need to go there on business for one day.
Then you need to go to Central Station. That's for all the national services. There are regular trains to London. They leave Trebirch every half hour on weekdays and every hour at weekends. It takes about 2 hours, a bit longer on Sundays. You've got a choice of first and second class, and there's a buffet car, though refreshments are included in the cost of a first-class ticket.
Ah, right. And have you got any information on different ticket types?
Yes, there's a range of ticket prices depending on when you travel and when you buy your ticket. There's a standard open ticket, which doesn't have any restrictions. This can be bought in advance or on the day. You can also get various discounted tickets. A popular one is called the Super Save, and this is okay for travel after 8:45. Then there is the special ticket, which is valid for travel after 10:15. The special tickets are also valid for travel at weekends. The cheapest tickets are called advance, and you have to buy them at least 6 days ahead. Only a certain number are available, and you have to make seat reservations for these.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
Thanks. And are there lots of places to go to around here?
Oh, yes. You can enjoy many days out. There's the Merthyr Mining Museum, which is only half an hour from Trebirch by train. Your children will find it just as fascinating as any theme park, and they can ride in the original miners' lifts and on the coal trains. There are special excursion tickets which include entrance fees. Mainline trains also offer direct services to Bristol, where you can visit the docks or spend a great day out with the children in the zoo, which is set in the parkland that used to surround the old castle. Special family away day fares are available for this service now during the school holidays. Alternatively, you can be in Birmingham in only an hour and a half, where there's lots to see and do, including the new and internationally acclaimed climbing wall built on the site of the old aquarium. We will also be running a special service to Newport when the new Science Museum opens next year, as we anticipate a lot of visitors in the opening weeks. I'd advise you to call early to book your tickets. Is that okay?
Yes, thanks.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a discussion between a tutor and an education student called Sandy about the student's dissertation. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hello, Sandy. How have you been getting on with your dissertation?
Fine. And I've been working hard on the various action points we agreed on our last tutorial.
Do you want to talk me through what you've done?
Yeah, sure. Well, we agreed on 3 main targets for me to aim for. The first one was to find out about suitable data analysis software.
Yes.
And what I decided to do was to look through catalogues specialising in IT.
That's a good idea. What did you come up with?
I found the names of 2 promising ones.
Right.
But I also thought it'd be worthwhile talking to a lecturer.
Oh, right. Who did you see?
Jane Prince. Do you know her? She's in the computer centre?
Yes, of course. She's the new head.
Yes, well, she was very helpful.
Oh, that's good. Did she suggest anything in particular?
Yeah, she recommended software called VVAT and said I should book up for a couple of practice sessions using VVAT.
Great. I'm sure you'll find them useful.
And, of course, the second target was to draw up a survey checklist, which
Yes, you emailed me it last week.
Have you had a chance to look?
Of course. I think it's good. Very much on the right lines. I'd say your first 2 sections are spot on.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't suggest that you change anything there, but in Section 3 you really do need to have questions on teaching experience.
Yeah, I was thinking that section looked a bit short.
Right.
And my third target was do further reading on discipline.
Oh, yes. I mentioned a couple of writers, didn't I?
Yes, well, I got hold of the Banerjee, and I thought that was excellent, but I'm afraid I didn't manage to get hold of the essays about classroom management. You know, the ones by Simon Erickson. The bookshop said it was out of print, and the library doesn't have a copy.
Oh, right. And I'm afraid I've lent my copy to another student. What I suggest you do is try the library again. This time apply for it through the service called Special Loans. Have you done that before? You're entitled to 6 books a year.
Yes, no problem. That's what I'll do.
So, lots of useful work done.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
So let's look at some new targets. We'll start by having a chat about your Chapter 1. I very much enjoyed reading it. Your written style is very clear, and you've included lots of interesting descriptions of education in your target area. I've just got a couple of suggestions for some additional work.
Of course. Could I just ask, what do you think I should call it?
Well, I'd go for something like context review. What do you think?
Well, short and to the point.
Exactly. Now, as regards specific areas to work on, I'd be quite interested to have a few more statistics about the schools in the different zones.
Oh, that wouldn't be a problem. I can get them from the internet.
Great. And although you did make a reference to quite a few different writers, I think you should aim to cite more works written later than 2000.
OK. That's more difficult, but I can try. When do you want that done by?
Oh, it's not urgent. I should aim for the end of term. But in the meantime, I think you should also be thinking about Chapter 2.
Should I be drafting it already?
No, but I think you should note down its main sections.
Yes. You know, I always find that the hardest part...
I always find it helpful to put some ideas on index cards.
Yeah.
And then you can sort them and even lay them out on the floor. It's a real help.
Well, I'll certainly try it. When would the deadline be for that?
My advice would be to get it done before you embark upon the research. You can always change it later if you need to.
Okay, I'll get going on that then.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about the history of moving pictures. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Many believe that the story first began in America in 1877, when two friends were arguing over whether a horse ever had all 4 feet, or hooves, off the ground when it galloped. To settle the bet, a photographer was asked to photograph a horse galloping, and the bet was settled because you could see that all the hooves were off the ground in some of the photos. What was even more interesting was that if the photos were shown in quick succession, the horse looked like it was running. In other words, moving pictures. The person who became interested in taking the moving pictures to its next step was the famous American inventor Thomas Edison. Actually, he didn't do the work himself, but rather asked a young Scotsman in his employ to design a system, which he did. Now, this young fellow was clever, because the first thing he did was study other systems, primitive as they were, of moving pictures, and then put all the existing technologies together to make the first entire motion picture system. He designed a camera, a projection device, and the film. The system was first shown in New York in 1894 and was really very popular. Apparently, people lined up around the block to see the wonderful new invention. There were, however, a couple of problems with the system. The camera weighed over 200 kilograms, and only one person at a time could see the film. Well now, news of the new system in America traveled fast, and a number of rival European systems started to appear once people had heard about it. The single problem with all the systems was they couldn't really project the film onto a screen, so more than one person could see it. Then, in 1895, 3 systems were all developed, more or less at the same time and independently of each other. I guess the most famous of these was by the Lumière brothers from France, and they called their system the cinematograph, which of course is where the word cinema comes from. There were also 2 brothers in Germany who developed a successful system, and they called it a bioscope. Well, Now, once the problem of projection had been solved, the next challenge for the inventors was to make the films longer and more interesting. A continuing problem at the time was that the films had a tendency to break when they were being played, a problem which was caused by the tension between the two wheels, or reels as they are called, which hold the film. Now, this problem was solved by two American brothers. They developed the Latham loop, which was the simple addition of a third reel between the two main reels, and this took all the tension away, with the result that the film stopped snapping. So now there was a real possibility of having films of more than 2 or 3 minutes. And this led to the making of The Great Train Robbery, the very first movie made. It only lasted 11 minutes, but was an absolute sensation, and there were cases of people watching the movie and actually fainting when the character fired a gun at the camera. Almost overnight, movies became a craze, and by 1905, people in America were lining up to see movies in store theaters, as they were called then. I guess the next big step in terms of development of technology was to have people actually talking on the film. And the first step towards this was in 1926, when sound effects were first used on a film. It wasn't until the following year, however, that the first talkie, as they were called then, was made. This film featured actors speaking only during parts of the film, and was called The Jazz Singer. And it wasn't until 1928 that the first all-talking film was produced, and this was called The Lights of New York. Unfortunately, the sound on this early film was not very good, and I believe they put subtitles on the film. That is, they printed the dialogue along the bottom of the film to compensate for this poor sound quality. Now, with the addition of sound, moving pictures became far more difficult to make.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. Section 1. You will hear a man talking to the customer services manager of a bank. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Good morning. I'd like to open a bank account, please.
Certainly. If you'd like to take a seat, I'll just get some details from you. It won't take long.
Thanks.
Is it a current account or a deposit account you wanted?
A current account.
The man wishes to apply for a current account, so current has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning. I'd like to open a bank account, please.
Certainly. If you'd like to take a seat, I'll just get some details from you. It won't take long.
Thanks.
Is it a current account or a deposit account you wanted?
A current account.
Right. I've got the application form here then. We have different types. I see you've got our leaflet there.
I decided on the one called Select.
Right, that's fine. So, first of all, can I have your full name, please?
Yes, it's Peter Hennis. That's Pieter.
Is it Hennes?
Only one N, actually. It's a less common spelling of the name.
Oh, right. Okay. And what's your date of birth, please?
The 27th of the 1st, 1973.
Right. And will this be a joint account?
No, just myself.
Okay, fine. And where are you living, Mr. Hennes?
15 Riverside.
Is that all one word?
Yes.
Exeter?
Yes.
How long have you been at your present address? Is it more than 2 years?
Just 2 weeks, actually. I only arrived in the country a month ago. I'm from Holland.
Oh, that's fine. But we normally ask for a previous address in that case.
Oh, yes. Well, it's Rielsdorf 2. That's Rielsdorf 2, Utrecht.
Holland. Okay, thank you. Do you have a daytime telephone number?
Yes, I think the number at my office is 606-295. Just a minute, I'd better check. Oh, no, sorry, 616. I'm not used to it yet. Would you like my home number, too?
Yes, please.
It's 796431.
Are they both local numbers?
Yes.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Right, and your occupation?
Well, I'm in Britain as a project manager, but that's not my main job. I'm an engineer by profession.
I see. I think I'll put that then. It's shorter. Now, we usually ask for a piece of information which we can use to check your identity for security reasons. You know, if you phone us.
Like my wife's first name?
Mother's might be better. It's less likely to be known.
Okay, hers is Siti.
Siti?
Yes, Siti. It's Indonesian.
Fine. And how much would you like to open your account with? We usually ask for a minimum sum of £50. That's about €75.
Well, I'm going to transfer €2,000 from my Dutch account, just till I get paid. In fact, I wanted to ask you about that. What's the best way to do it?
It depends which bank you're with.
It's the Fransen Bank in Utrecht.
Okay, fine. I'll check that in a minute. If we have links with them, we can do a direct transfer, but it's not a big problem either way. Let's see. How often would you like to receive statements?
I haven't really thought. What's the usual thing?
It's up to you. Some people like them weekly.
Oh, no, that's too often. Can I have them sent once a month?
Yes, that's fine. Is there anything else?
I was thinking of registering for your internet service at some stage.
Oh, yes. Would you like me to send you information about that?
Please, yes.
And would you like to receive information about the bank's other services? Insurance, loans, anything like that?
I don't think so, thanks.
That's okay then. And one last thing. If you agree...
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a guide giving visitors to a country house information about the house and gardens. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
Welcome, everybody, to the lovely house and gardens of Rosewood, once the home of the famous writer Sebastian George. He bought the house in 1902, although he had first seen it 2 years earlier. At that time, the owners let it out to a tenant because George was too slow making up his mind to buy it. When it came back on the market, there was no hesitation, and he bought it immediately for £9,300, even though the house had no bathroom, no running water upstairs, and no electricity. When he came here, he'd been married for 10 years. During that time, he'd become one of the most famous writers in the English-speaking world. His professional success was enormous, but his personal life wasn't as successful. He was no longer on speaking terms with his brother and had been devastated by the death at the age of 7 of his elder daughter, Josephine. Moving to Rosewood allowed the family to start a new life. George regarded Rosewood as a pure example of a traditional country house of this part of England and did some of his most successful writing here. The house and its grounds became the family haven and their escape to privacy and quiet. The walls and the mullioned windows were built of the local sandstone. The tiles on the roofs and the bricks of the chimney stack were baked from local clay, and the wooden structures inside came from oak trees which grow around here.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
Now, please look at the map I've given you of the house and gardens. We're here at the information centre. Follow the path marked with the arrow, and the first area you come to is the orchard on your left. As you go further down the path, there's the kitchen garden on the right. And as you go round the first sharp corner, you will find to your left an area where different types of pear tree have been planted, as well as some lovely flowers. And this is known as Pear Alley, designed by George himself. Next to this is the greenhouse, where some exotic plants and fruits are grown. Follow the path round the second corner, and on your right you will see the entrance to the mulberry garden with its 500-year-old tree. Past the mulberry garden, follow the path until you reach the front of the house. I suggest you spend a good hour wandering around this lovely building. A guide takes visitor groups round every 2 hours. If you would like to purchase any of George's books or other souvenirs, then leave the house by the side entrance, where you will find our shop, which is situated between the house and the garage, which contains the magnificent old Rolls-Royce car, which used to belong to George. I expect by this time you may also be in need of a rest and some refreshment. Most visitors are, so why don't you visit the tea room on the far side of the garage? If you have time, there is a lovely walk down towards the River Dudwell. For me, this is the best part of the estate. This isn't on the map, but it is all clearly signposted. You cross the field, which spreads along the banks of the river. In spring, this area is well worth a visit. Spend a minute or two watching the water pass by underneath as you cross the footbridge, and then continue along the river walk through the woodland. On a hot summer's day, the trees along this path provide welcome shade. Eventually, you come to the watermill, which used to provide the electricity for the house. Only about 4 hours every evening in George's time. And finally, for those of you who would like to see stunning views of the surrounding countryside and who are a little bit more energetic, when you return from the mill, take the first turning on your left and climb up to the viewpoint. You won't regret it. Enjoy your visit.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear 2 students, Jack and Lucy, discussing a marketing assignment they are working on together. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Lucy, we really need to get working on this marketing assignment. We've only got 5 weeks left to the end of term to design it, carry it out, and then write up the results.
Sure. Well, let's get started right now. Let's go over the instructions. What exactly do we have to do?
Well, it says here we have to look at one area of the entertainment industry. There's a list of the different types.
What are they?
Music, cinema, theatre, sport, and eating out.
Is that all?
Looks like it.
So we choose one branch of the industry and then we look at how 2 different groups of people use it. Is that right?
Yes.
And do we have to use any particular method to get our data? Can we mail out a questionnaire or do face-to-face interviews or maybe even observations?
Well, actually, it looks like we don't have a choice. We have to do telephone interviews.
OK, so at least we don't have to waste time deciding between the different methods.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, and the other requirement is the number of interviewees.
Not too many, I hope. 10? 20?
Well, we have to do 2 groups, remember, and it looks like we have to interview 15 for each group.
That's 30 altogether, then. It's going to take ages.
Yes, but remember, we're working on this together, so we'll only have to do 15 each.
OK, so those are all the requirements?
Yes, looks like it.
So, first, which area are we going to choose? My preference would be cinema, since that's where I spend most of my money.
I don't think that's such a good idea. I don't think there are huge differences in the market there. I mean, you get young and old, male and female, rich and poor, all going to the same movies.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Let's make it music, then.
Right. So, what 2 groups will we compare and contrast?
Male and female?
No. Most of my female friends like the same music as me. Different age groups will be much more likely to show up differences, I think.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Yeah, I suppose you're right again. I'll take some notes, shall I? So, age groups. Well, what do you think? Maybe 25 or under for one group and 45 or over for the other group? That should show up differences.
Right.
Okay, next. How about the kind of music they like? Let's give them some choices and then we can just tick boxes.
Okay, let's have pop, jazz, folk, easy listening. What else?
Well, we should include classical. Some people like it, you know.
Okay, and then we should have how they listen to music.
The medium. Right, let's include radio, CD, and then I guess there's TV.
What about concerts? You know, in pubs and halls.
Oh yeah, we should include live music, of course.
Okay, we're on a roll now. Next point could be about where they actually get their music.
You mean, like, do they buy it in music shops or department stores?
Yes, or download it from the internet.
Right. That could be for recorded music. Then we need another section for live music. Where do they go for that?
Okay, let's say disco, pub, club, concert hall.
Or opera house. And I guess we should include karaoke bars.
Not many of them in this city.
Okay, we'll leave that out then. So, what's left to do?
That's it. Well, now we can make a timescale for doing it.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking about farming in ancient Ireland. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. Last week we were looking at the hunter-gatherers in Ireland, across the Irish Sea from England. Today we're going to move on to the period between 4,000 and 6,000 years ago, known as the Neolithic period, which is when a total farming economy was introduced in Ireland. Now, there are several hypotheses about the origins of the first Neolithic settlers in Ireland, but most of these contain problems. For instance, there are considerable archaeological difficulties about the theory that they came from England. The evidence doesn't really add up. But there are even greater practical problems about the theory that they came directly from continental Europe. For one thing, it's not clear just how sufficient numbers of men and women could have been transported to Ireland to establish a viable population. As you know, the hunter-gatherer economy which existed beforehand was based on small, scattered groups. The farming economy would almost certainly have required much larger communities to do all the work needed to plant and tend sufficient crops to sustain them through the year. The early farmers kept various animals, including cattle and sheep. There's also evidence of pigs, but it is possible that these could have been descended from the native wild species. Now, we know from modern farming that if the level of breeding stock falls below about 300 females, The future of the species locally is at risk. So we must assume that from the beginnings of Neolithic farming, the number of breeding sheep would have considerably exceeded 300, and the national cattle herd must have been of a similar size. The question is how these were brought to the area and where they came from. It's usually suggested that the Neolithic settlers used skin-covered boats to transport livestock, but this method would have severely restricted the range of the colonizing fleets. The sheer volume of animal transport necessary means it's unlikely that this livestock could have been brought from anywhere further than England. What about crops? Well, two main cereal crops were introduced to Ireland during this time, wheat and barley, both in several varieties. The main evidence for their presence consists of impressions on pottery, where a cereal grain accidentally became embedded in the surface of a pot before it was fired. The grain itself was destroyed by the firing, but it left an impression on the pot which could be studied and identified by botanists. Let's turn our attention now to the farming technology available at that time. Before the cereal crops could be planted, it would have been necessary to clear the forest and to break the ground by ploughing. The stone blade of a plough has been discovered during excavation in County Mayo in Western Ireland. The body of the plough would have been of wood and could have been drawn by people, but it's also likely that cattle were used. Now, the cultivation of crops and the husbandry of livestock brought about changes in people's lifestyle, such as the type of shelters they made. For one thing, instead of moving from place to place, they needed permanent dwellings. The stone axes used to chop down trees to make these dwellings were far superior to any that the Stone Age hunter-gatherers used. To make the axes, sources of suitable stone had to be found and systematically exploited. These so-called axe factories were really quarries rather than factories, as the manufacture of the axes wasn't regularly performed on the quarry site. However, after the axe had been chipped into shape, they needed water and sand for grinding and polishing, so a high mountainside wouldn't have been an appropriate place for this. So this final stage of the manufacture must have been carried out close to water, and sure enough, there's ample evidence of this at coastal sites. Now, it's clear that these Neolithic axes were transported all over Ireland, as well as to Scotland and the south of England. It's not really surprising that axes from axe factories in England have also been found in Ireland. At the very least, this indicates that there was a link between the two islands during that period. One of the most useful innovations of the colonizers was pottery making, which was quite unknown to Irish hunter-gatherers. The pottery was probably made by shaping clay into a ball with the hand, and then hollowing it until the walls were the right thickness. After firing, the outside was often polished. This would have helped the pots to retain water, as they weren't glazed. Now, we know that the clay used usually came from local sources, which suggests that manufacture was on a fairly small scale, even though thousands of fragments are usually found at Neolithic sites. In the course of time, decoration began to appear. At first, this looked like a series of stitches and was just around the tops of the pots. This could have been an imitation of earlier vessels, which were made of leather sewn onto wood. Then, eventually, pots with decoration all over became much more
prevalent. That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. Section 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a woman and the reservations clerk at a conference centre. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Conference Centre reservations. Good morning.
Hi, I'm interested in the computing conference next month.
Future directions in computing?
Yes, that's right.
The title of the course is Future Directions in Computing, so Future Directions has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Conference Centre reservations. Good morning.
Hi, I'm interested in the computing conference next month.
Future directions in computing?
Yes, that's right. Could I ask you a few questions about it?
Of course.
Okay. I know the conference is for 3 days, but actually I want to attend on the Friday and Saturday only. Will that work out to be any cheaper?
Let me have a look. Well, you could register for the 2 days separately, but that wouldn't actually save you very much, as it still costs £35 for each day. In fact, if you could register for the 3 days, you also get an invitation to a free dinner on the Saturday night, so that's probably the better option.
Right, I'll do that. How much will the fees be in that case?
It's £75.
All right. I'd like to register for the full 3 days. Now, can I pay that by credit card?
I'm afraid not. You'll have to send a cheque to us. Or you can pay at the conference office.
Fine. So it's probably easiest if I pay by cheque. Now then, what else do I need to arrange? Right. How about accommodation? I guess that's not included in the price.
No, I'm sorry, it's not. But we do have a few rooms available for delegates at the conference centre if you'd like. Those are very cheap, but if you're interested, you'll need to book soon because there's always a heavy demand for them. They are only £15 per night, but they are very basic, and you'd have to get your own breakfast because they don't provide you with that. But it's very convenient because it's in the same building as the conference rooms.
Uh-huh.
Or there's a very reasonable guest house, which is £25 per night, and I think that includes your breakfast.
Is it close to the conference centre?
It would be about a 10-minute walk away from here.
I see. That sounds quite reasonable.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
The details are all in our conference pack, which I'll send you.
Great, thanks. That'll be very useful. Oh, and can you also send me an application form?
Of course. I'll get that in the post to you straight away. Is there anything else?
Yes, actually. Can you tell me where exactly the conference centre is?
Well, it's on South Park Road, and it's right at the end of the road next to the library. It's a 10-minute taxi ride from the station and will cost you £5. Otherwise, you can take the bus, which runs every half an hour from the station. That's the 21A, and it brings you straight to the conference centre.
Right, got that.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear an introductory talk to a group of temporary workers at an international travel exhibition. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
Good morning and welcome everybody. I'm Jenny Stewart and I'm the staff manager here at the Exhibition Centre. We're expecting this year's International Travel Exhibition to attract over 10,000 visitors a day, ladies and gentlemen, and you are among the 200 extra staff recruited to help look after them. Now, to help things run smoothly, we have divided you into 4 teams: the blue team, the green team, the red team and the yellow team. So first, I'll explain how the teams are divided up, and then we'll be giving you colour-coded T-shirts so we can identify you more easily. First of all, those who will be looking after the phones and handling all calls regarding the exhibition, you will be on the red team. Now, we've also put the entrance staff on the red team, and you'll be stamping the entrance tickets and giving out publicity leaflets, okay? Those of you involved in distributing entrance tickets will be on the yellow team, and we've also put those of you who'll be staffing the information booths around the conference centre on the yellow team, so you'll be getting a yellow T-shirt. Now, most of the hospitality staff have been put in the blue team, so the chefs among you and the kitchen hands will all need a blue T-shirt, but because of the sheer numbers, all waiting staff will be on the yellow team, and this includes the bar staff among you. Those who will be monitoring and directing the traffic in the car parks are on the green team, so you'll need to get a green T-shirt. This year, we've also employed a considerable number of attendants to direct the human traffic around the conference centre. Now, you'll be working in the exhibition hall at all times, giving directions and generally helping people whenever you can. And you will be in the red team, so please collect a red T-shirt.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
Right. Now that everyone knows what team they're in, we'll get on with the orientation and training program. And first, I'll run through the rest of today's program, which you should have in front of you so that you can get a general idea of what else is in store today. This introduction finishes at 9:30. And then you'll be hearing from Anne Smith. Anne works in the accounts department on level 2, and she looks after all temporary staff, and so she is the person to see if you have any problems regarding pay. Anne will be explaining when and how you get this. She will also be handing out your tax forms. And I will just stress that All tax forms must be completed and returned to Anne before your pay can be processed. Following Anne's talk, you'll hear from Peter Chen, our conference manager, and he will be going over a plan of the conference centre with you, which will help you to orient yourselves. He will also go through the security arrangements with you and show you the fire exits. Then, at 10:30, there will be a coffee break in the staff canteen, which is located down on the ground floor. Now, after the break, we'll be moving to a different location for a video presentation, so instead of coming back here, we'd like you all to go to Lecture Room 311. You'll find it on this same level, just down the hall, and there you will be shown a video about important safety issues in the workplace called Safety at Work. We'll finish off the morning with lunch, which should give everyone a chance to meet and get to know each other, and we'll be serving you a buffet lunch in the main hall, which is on the first floor from 12 o'clock. After lunch, you'll be divided up into your teams to meet your team leaders, and we're hoping to be all finished by 3, so I won't delay you any longer, and I'll hand over.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear a conversation between a librarian and an education student. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 27. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 27.
Good afternoon. Can I help you?
Good afternoon. Yes, I've just transferred to the School of Education, and I'd like information about joining the library.
Well, the School of Education has libraries on 2 sites, as I'm sure you know. This one here is the Fordham site, and the other is on Castle Road.
And is there any difference between the 2 libraries?
Not in terms of their facilities. Access to online databases and the internet is available at both sites, and each site has a range of reference materials on education.
Oh, yes, I see.
But the Castle Road site has books on the sociology of education and a collection of textbooks and teaching resources covering most of the subjects taught in secondary schools.
Ah, right. But I'm training to be a primary teacher, so I need to look at materials for the 5 to 11 age group.
Then you've come to the right place. At Fordham, we hold material relating to primary education, as well as special needs. But, of course, you'll need to familiarise yourself with both sites to make the most of our resources.
You haven't mentioned periodicals. Are they held at both sites?
Current issues, yes, but if you want to look at back issues, you'll need to use the CD-ROM databases, which are held here at Fordham.
I see. Now, about borrowing books, I'm living out of town, so I'm hoping I can borrow quite a few items and cut down on the number of trips I have to make.
Right, well, members can borrow 2 books at a time from each site.
Only 2 books?
Only 2 from each site, but that's 4 altogether.
Oh, I see. And how long can I hang on to them for?
The borrowing period is 1 month, but of course books can be renewed. You can renew any item a maximum of 3 times.
Do I have to come to the library to do that?
No, you can do it by telephone or email, but you can't renew overdue books this way, only before or on the due date stamped in the book. We'll need your full name, your borrower number, and the name of the site library you borrowed the items from.
So, theoretically, I can borrow books for up to 3 months. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, provided they're not recalled.
So, what happens then?
Well, sometimes an item is requested by another borrower, in which case we'd send you a letter, and you'd have to return the book within 7 working days. Don't forget we're closed on Sundays.
Okay.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 28 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 28 to 30.
I expect it'll take me a while to find what I need. There's such a lot here.
Yes, there is. But if you need help getting started, this term we're running 3 study skills workshops.
Oh? What are they on?
Let me see. The first one's on resources. Yes, here it is. How to use the library's resources. That includes everything, not just the print and technical resources.
That sounds useful. Is there anything on using the internet?
Let's see. The one on the internet for beginners was last term. This term it's finding research materials online.
That sounds interesting too. What's the last one?
It's a workshop on dissertations.
What do you mean? How to write one?
No, it's more to do with academic writing conventions. You know, writing a bibliography and how to refer to sources in your text, that sort of thing. Anyway, here's a leaflet with information about all 3.
Oh, thanks a lot. That'll be very useful.
You're welcome.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture given by a conservationist on the subject of lions. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Well, most people think that lions only come from Africa. And you would be forgiven for thinking this, because in fact most lions do come from Africa. But this hasn't always been the case. If we go back 10,000 years, we would find that there were lions roaming vast sections of the globe. But now, unfortunately, only very small sections of the lion's former habitat remain. My particular interest is Asiatic lions, which are a subspecies of African lions. It's almost 100,000 years since the Asiatic lion split off and developed as a subspecies. At one time, the Asiatic lion was living as far west as Greece, and they were found from there in a band that spread east through various countries of the Middle East, all the way to India. In museums, you can now see Greek coins that have clear images of the Asiatic lion on them. Most of them are dated at around 500 BC. However, Europe saw its last Asiatic lion roaming free 2,000 years ago. Over the next 1900 years, the numbers of Asiatic lions in the other areas declined steadily. But it was only in the 19th century that they disappeared from everywhere but India. So, how can you tell an Asiatic lion from an African lion, with which you're probably more familiar? Well, in general, Asiatic lions are not as big as African lions. The colour is more or less the same, but the appearance of the mane is different. That's the hair around the lion's face and neck. The Asiatic lion's mane is noticeably shorter than the African lion's. Asiatic lions also have a long fold of skin on their undersides, whereas not many African lions have this. Well, I'd like to talk to you now about the Gir Sanctuary in India. That's where I've just come back from. The sanctuary was established specifically to protect the Asiatic lion. It's 1,450 square kilometres in area, and most of it is forest. There are now around 300 Asiatic lions in India, and almost all of them are in this sanctuary. But despite living in a sanctuary, which makes them safe from hunters, they still face a number of problems that threaten their survival. One of these is the ever-present danger of disease. This is what killed more than a third of Africa's Serengeti lions in 1994, and people are fearful that something similar could happen in the Gir Sanctuary and kill off many of the Asiatic lions there. India's lions are particularly vulnerable because they have a limited gene pool. The reason for this is interesting. It's because all of them are descended from a few dozen lions that were saved by a prince who took a particular interest in them. He was very wealthy, and he managed to protect them. Otherwise, they'd probably have died out completely. When you see the Asiatic lion in India, what you sense is enormous vitality. They're very impressive beasts, and you would never guess that they had this vulnerability when you look at them. The Asiatic lions don't have the Gir Sanctuary to themselves, I should add. They actually share it with about 2,000 farmers. A significant proportion of the lion's diet is made up of the livestock of these farmers, goats, chickens, and so on, as much as a third, in fact. And they've even been known to attack humans, especially in times of drought. One final piece of interesting information. In ancient India, one of the greatest tests of leadership for a man was to fight a lion. Now, it seems, in modern India, it will be a great test to see if the lion can be saved. I'm sure this is something that all of you will share concern for too.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.